Kranz. We have Matt Althoff back in studio with us today. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Renee.
Matt
it's an honor to be here twice in a week.
I know, twice in a row. It's not even on the same day. We actually are recording different days, which is great. So we have different, well, I don't know if you have different things on, but I have different clothes on.
Probably pretty similar.
Sometimes we record several episodes in one day, and people are probably like, do these people ever change their clothes? Matt is the Chancellor of the Diocese of Sioux Falls, and it was on last week to tell us more about the Set Ablaze planning initiative for the diocese. And we wanted to bring him back because there's just a lot to talk about. And we only got about partway through. So we wanted to do another round so people can get lots of good information. So thanks for coming back.
And I think that thank you very much for the honor, Renee. I think that's true of any sort of consultative process. Mm-hmm. The reality is that you learn as much about what you're doing through the process than you ever do by the outcome. Right. So I think I really sincerely appreciate my own personal experience, having been sort of the facilitating on the internal side here at the Chancery. I know so much more about what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do what we're trying to do, is because of my own repeating, hearing it again, experiencing something, looking back on it. And so as the expression goes, repetition's the mother of all learning. And I sincerely appreciate the privilege to be here to just kind of talk about it. And I'm sure that I'll repeat myself, and I think that's okay. And I hope that in some of the things that people aren't, feel as though they're hearing for the first time, maybe that's true, but just encourage it. There's no one sort of magic potion, or there's no one sort of solution preordained.
Right.
That's the nature of this, is that it very sincerely is the consultation is leading to a better outcome. That's the purpose. We're not asking people for the sake of asking people. We are asking people because we want to very sincerely improve the outcome of this consultative process.
Right.
So.
And I think that's really important for people to understand, because there wasn't a pre-planned, hey, this is how it's going to end up in the end.
That's right.
There really isn't. So.
That's right.
Okay, can you start? We didn't really get a chance to talk about this last time. So there's kind of some mechanics about this process that have happened, and there will be some milestones as we go forward. So can you talk about those two things so people understand where we are?
Thank you very much. So right now we are in the process of pursuing milestone number 1, and that is to design a new structure. Mm-hmm. A new structure with which we will be able to, in a stable way, the bishop will be able to staff with priestly resources, the numbers of priests we have, a particular arrangement of local churches or parishes. And so the consultation has been a 2-step. They first got an email back in early September. Come read this current reality report that refers to the why we're doing what we're doing. Now, what is sort of the vision or a way of doing the what, these models, these pictures on a map, or circles on a map, really, the laity are being asked to say, in light of the why, we have shrinking, diminished participation in the sacramental and liturgical and other aspects of the life of the church. We need to radically change what we're doing, and hence the what is what we're referring to as this pastorate. Right. We're asking for feedback. Please, if you have suggestions that you think would improve the model as it's being designed, we welcome that. And we're so grateful here. 1 week into this, less than that, we've received well over 100 comments, submissions, super helpful. All that's being read. We won't be able to do personal responses to every submission, but be assured every one of those is being read and will be summarized, these suggestions, so that they'll go into the modeling of a final recommendation. This is milestone number 1 of a pastorate model. This is the structure. Milestone number 2, we will quickly be transitioning to, and a lot of this is concurrent. We're working with the clergy on this right now. It forms what are the parameters with which a pastorate may be implemented. Okay. And let's remember that within those parameters, a pastorate is being erected for really an explicit purpose of to initiate pastoral planning. We talked about it last time. It's a mission field. And so collaborating with sister parishes, collaborating with clergy, this will lead to parameters by which what are the abilities and disallowed in terms of as we envision a new structure in our local pastorate. So those parameters and what we're calling process guidelines, how do you go about pastoral planning, they aid and give some what we're calling tight and loose sort of structure or tight and loose requirements for the local, because this is a very important aspect of the Holy Father's instructions. There needs to be much more local involvement in pastoral planning.
Right.
So that is milestone number 2, as I said, we're calling it parameters and process guidelines. Yeah.
Before you move to pastorate parameter, or good grief, milestone number 3, I just want to put together a little example of that second milestone. So if you have, I actually don't remember what a lot of the circles are, but so let's take my hometown is Watertown, Castlewood area. So let's just take that, and let's just say, again, I do not remember what ones are in the circle, so I'm just going to name off some parishes. Let's say you have Watertown, Cransburg, Castlewood, Esteline. I remember maybe there was a Henry or something in there. So you have this circle. You're going to have 2 or 3 priests, or however many were in there, and some of the parameters might be things like each priest can only say 3 masses on a weekend. That might be a more tight parameter that you're referring to, but a loose parameter maybe could be you all have to figure out your religious ed program together. Is that kind of a good example?
That's exactly right. And I would say one of the other tight ones, of course, is now within that circle, there's one priest serving as the pastor for all. And in that particular model, there are multiple priests that are assigned, so he's collaborating with others. The numbers of masses, but then the parameters will also get into what is ways by which you can administer that collection of parishes, that pastorate. So do you have a business manager that has oversight responsibilities for each of the physical churches within the circle? Do you have a religious education instructor that has oversight for all the various programs? Not to say that what they're looking for under the pastor. Remember, these are all extensions of the pastor's teaching ministry. That DRE would just look to bring consistency.
Right.
But of course, in consultation, you would do that in a way that well, this is the way we've always done it in Castlewood, but this is the way we've always done it in Cransburg. So, we can make a solution from that. We don't necessarily have to say we're going to impose uniformly. But that's a good example. The other pieces would be the compositions of councils.
Right, yeah.
The church envisions explicitly that priests have limited numbers of gifts, right? They're not omniscient. So it actually causes or forces priests to erect councils at their various parishes. The pastorate would then give some tight and loose parameters around what does council composition look like. And this will raise a lot of questions unequivocally. I want to be very clear. This is being completely and very intentionally deferred to the pastoral planning process, where there's local consultation. But ultimately, a number of churches. Absolutely, within the church's law, you could have one parish with many churches within it. So that's
many church buildings. Yeah,
many church buildings. That's right. Yeah. So that's another sort of the innovative thought. Does that make sense? Maybe it doesn't.
Right.
Maybe, as the bishop has been very clear, pastors are defined as a collection of parishes. Maybe they say, no, it makes sense to maintain our autonomous nature as parishes, but still have a common pastor, and then we realize we collaborate and cooperate in other ways.
Right.
So that's the parameters document, and it'll it just sets some what are metes and bounds, what are things that can be done, what are things that cannot be done as we implement the pastorate model.
Right. And the thing I really like about that is to me, even though there are some tighter parameters, but it allows for lots of creativity within those pastorates to do things differently in a collaborative way than what we've done before.
Local culture, local customs are so essential, and this is exactly why you want to meet them where they're at. You want to respect that and understand that before you impose something, and that's the whole purpose of a pastoral planning process within a much tighter mission field, as we call it, this pastorate, that context. So it's just easier to deal with the spectrum of those customs and cultures and the persons working together, collaborating. It just narrows the numbers of variables, and that becomes a much more workable sort of environment in which to get a better outcome is the desire.
Yeah, and it may not always be easy, but it might be fun.
If this were left to only humans, this would be brutal.
Yes, true.
Hence,
the Holy Spirit will hopefully guide lots of us.
I don't mean that in anything pejorative. That's just our nature. But we want to emphasize, ultimately, all of this is meant to unleash the fires of the Holy Spirit. That's what Set Ablaze is about. So we all, throughout these processes of consultation and implementation, that's our desire for everyone, is for us to become increasingly aware of God's presence in our lives, God's guidance of His church.
Right.
And so that's essential. If it's all about what man can create, I think we have no further than the halls of Congress, the halls of City Hall. Just where human interaction is there. I just really think that if there isn't a supernatural involvement, if the divine love of God permeating throughout all of this, we're not likely to get much different results than what we've been receiving or seeing in our current reality report.
Yeah, totally true. If you just joined us, we're talking to Matt Althoff about the Set Ablaze planning initiative in the diocese. Okay, so Matt, go ahead and move on with milestone number 3.
Milestone number 3 is, of course, we have a certain faculty of priests. It takes special formation, it takes ordination, all of which many graces promised in that, and there is a vocational discernment. This is a very serious prospect and essential to our Catholic faith. We are nothing without Catholic priests and their ability to, bring us the sacraments. We have a finite number of them. And so the third milestone is going to be the assignment of priests. And this is a very important thing because, of course, the church is oftentimes expressed directly to us through Father. And we become very accustomed to Father and his particular giftedness. And some of our priests are, outstanding at one aspect of priestly ministry, and they tend to, as we all would do, they tend to play to those strengths. So that happens to be maybe a need or a want of some members of the parish at that particular time. So there becomes an attachment. This is hard. It's hard for priests to move. They become very familiar with people and very friendly. The authentic friendships develop in their assignments. But it is likely to result in priests moving in order to fit the model. And again, a huge part of that is going to be to say, well, we've just created much larger pastor assignments.
Right.
They have many more church buildings to worry about. They have many more souls to be focused on, and their charge is to save souls. Now they just got a whole lot more of them. Right. They're ultimately responsible in the spiritual salvation.
Yep.
So that will, be an intense examination of the priest's, history and experiences and what his particular giftedness is, so that who is it that's best suited, who among our priests are best suited to serve as pastors, who might flourish more in ministry if they're relieved altogether of the administrative responsibilities and they're permitted to really focus exclusively on priestly ministry things.
And some of the priests will love that, by the way. They'll be like, yes, please.
A sign of the Holy Spirit would be that every priest loves this new assignment.
Right.
That this will be hard.
It will be.
And I would emphasize, I hope that assessment isn't taken on June 30th and certainly not July 2nd. I hope it is, and I'm speaking figuratively here, but my hope would be is that 5 years from now, we find that the vast majority of our priests, on a personal inventory, finding themselves to be much healthier in mind, body, and spirit, much healthier. I already said that's very happier in life. Their disposition, their trust in the Lord is there, and much holier. They're much more dependent on God. They're much more reflective of God's presence in their life. That would be the goal. And I would emphasize that, is any human being, because we're bodied and souled creatures, our bodily tendencies are going to slow our ability to get to that transformation.
Yeah.
Some fast, some moderate speed, some really, really slow. That's, again, part of how we're unique in the eyes of God. But if we take a little bit longer view of assessment, that's the goal, is that through priest assignments, the alignment of priests, their abilities, their capabilities, their capacities to the pastorates as they've now been designed, and they're being implemented with parameters. Now we're beginning to create an essential milestone to this process where we're set. We're set up for success.
Right. And all of that then I think will, once you have the priests really in their giftedness, their strengths, that will help the lay faithful play to their strengths as well, because that'll kind of trickle down, a trickle-down effect in a way that the priests are holier, happier, healthier, so that helps the lay people get there as well.
I think I mentioned it last interview, but these circles are bigger, and there's a lot more geography in the vast majority of these places to get from church to church, physical church, that is. If we look at being a pastor through our current mindset, our current paradigm, our current experience, and then apply it to the pastorate model, we're probably destined to have a lot of priests just absolutely, being overworked, ridiculously tired, cranky, whatever those
Right.
sort of attributes of our human limitations manifesting themselves. Unequivocally, this only works if empowerment, if delegation happens. That's been something that's been talked about at length, clergy days,
Yeah.
lots of discussions about this need for us to recognize, allow the Holy Spirit to work through all of the baptized to fulfill the parish's mission, the church's mission. So unequivocally, we would hope to see lay persons being identified within those pastorates who can carry out essential, typically administrative functions
Right.
of the pastor's role.
Right.
By delegation, they still serve under his direction. They still work in explicit collaboration with Father. He knows what they're doing, and he's giving direction. He's course correcting. He's emphasizing his priorities, all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, they're doing it.
Right.
And I think I envision, I want to emphasize, there's a lot of priests that do this well already.
Right. That's very
This
true.
isn't newfound. I want to be very clear. We're on a spectrum when we speak in broad brushes across the diocese. But certainly in some parishes, because of the lack of staff and the limited resources of the parish, everything goes through Father. Every decision, every can I use the hall? Can I get married that day? Can I, all these sorts of things can really get, caught on Father's desk.
Yeah.
And the goal would be those are the types of things we can delegate.
Right. Because he can do the bigger things. then.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So milestone 4.
Milestone 4 will be a compilation of these milestones. So we've defined what is the pastorates. We've defined what are the parameters and the process guidelines. And we've decided who are the priests that are going to be serving in the respective parishes. And we, am speaking proverbially,
Right.
most all these are bishop decisions.
Right.
The consultation process is leading to a better recommendation of the bishop. He ultimately is deciding all these. Milestone 4 is really meant to be a lot of resources that are meant to help the visioning process.
Okay.
Here's a way to do it. It's not the way. It is a way to do it. How do you restructure the canonical structure of the parish? How do you restructure the legal, because these are all nonprofit corporations.
Right.
The composition of our councils. What are some examples of way ministry collaboration has happened? It's really just sort of an appendix to all of this, meant to say, help the laity and the facilitator they'll be working with and under the direction of the pastor as they implement this and go through the pastoral planning process, envision church in new ways. Right. And most of it would be best practice based,
right.
meaning that it's been done in other locales, other dioceses, archdioceses. Again, it is not the roadmap. It is a roadmap, and with complete deference or delegation to the local level.
Right.
The meat or the tight and loose, as I referenced, ultimately, the pastoral planning needs to arrive locally at a plan, but that plan is always subject to the approval of the bishop.
Right.
So we are still the one holy Catholic and apostolic church. And so there is this reality that it's a bunch of guides, and the encouragement is to say, figure out what works out best in that mission field.
Well, and the good thing, I think, is that really is attempting to set them up for success so that they have something to go with, something to start with, parameters, as we suggested, but also those kind of foundational resources that will help them succeed when they're planning.
With the explicit freedom, if you can do it better, please do so.
Yes.
Right? I mean, within parameters, right?
Yeah.
We've persisted for 2,000 years. I oftentimes joke, sometimes we can behave as though the upper room was in our town.
Right.
No, it was in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. So, the church wasn't invented here in eastern South Dakota, and it's been propagated for these 2,000 years because of the Holy Spirit, sometimes in spite of our human weakness and limitation. So, there are definitely some universal cans and cannots in this. But when I say that, but unequivocally, there are a lot of innovations and improvements upon how we are functioning as missionary disciples in the context of parish ministry, in the context of parish life, that have yet to be revealed, right? And I'm absolutely convinced that in many of these pastorates, brilliant new ideas, inspired no doubt by the Holy Spirit, will come forth about how to go about this.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that they will do that in a way that will be mindful of, those particular persons that have, might be estranged from parish ministries, and it's a beckoning to them, it's an invitation to them to come back. those who have been hurt in some way. They minister or something was said and they're hurt. And in this innovation, we find their ability to see the church in a whole new light because a missionary disciple has encountered them. They've seen the face of Christ. They've heard the witness of the gospel through common folk and through common language, not this sort of, here's the book and let me throw it at you. Right? That's the missionary discipleship approach that we're all being called to. So that would be my emphasis, is that the sky is really the limit, very honestly, about inventing new ways to function within these pastorates.
We only have about a minute, so this might not be fair to ask you this right now, but can you real quickly just describe what happens on July 1st next year?
There will be a whole new set of priest assignments. Many priests will have been moving, and in that context, there will be an explicit directive, a mandate for parishes that are proximal to one another to now begin collaborating in new ways. Okay. No longer do we function as we're parish and we continue to be duplicating. It is an explicit mandate from the bishop: collaborate.
Right.
Get to know one another, seek to understand what are your local customs and traditions, what are your circumstances, what is the resourcing you have, and then collaborate. Are there better ways that we can do this with our sister parishes that we've now been asked within this circle to work together with one purpose, and that is to achieve the vision, lifelong Catholic missionary discipleship through God's love.
That's a perfect way to end, because that really is where we want to go here. So thanks, Matt, for coming on again. We'll continue this conversation as we move through this, and probably may have you on again, but as things proceed, we'll see how it goes.
Thanks, Renee.
Thanks, Matt. If you want to learn more about Set Ablaze, you can go to setablazesf.org. All of the maps, the current reality report, Bishop's letters, some great videos from Bishop, and these interviews with Matt will be there as well. So if you want to share them with other people who haven't been able to see this information yet, please do. That is it for us today. Hope you'll join us again next week for more Catholic Views.